Shows him as the phone, but self-muted.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Mary Heil, and I am the webinar coordinator for today's presentation, the ABLE Act, Enable Savings for Life. Before we begin, I'd like to turn it over to the Illinois State Treasurer, Michael Frerichs, for some quick remarks on Illinois ABLE.
Mary, thank you very much, and thank you everyone who is participating on this webinar and for all of your hard work to date. I want to start by saying, we set up Illinois' ABLE program by working collectively with several other states. We felt we could accomplish a lot more working together than we could going it alone. And the same thing applies going forward. We are going to make this a better program by encouraging more feedback on the program. Our office always has an open door policy here, and just because it is established one way today doesn't mean it can't be amended or improved going forward. We really do seek and appreciate your feedback. So we look forward to working with everyone going forward, and I want to thank you very much for participating, and I will turn it back over to Mary.
Thank you very much, Treasurer Frerichs. Today's presentation will be led by Anne Ehlert, President and Founder of Protected Tomorrows. She is also a board member of Special Olympics. Our guest speakers are Karen Milligan of Special Olympics Illinois, Brian Rubin and Benjamin Rubin of Rubin Law, and Chasse Rehwinkel from the Illinois State's Treasurer's Office. Handouts are available for downloading. These include bios on each of our speakers, a summary of Illinois ABLE, a list of states and the status of the ABLE Act in each, and contact information should you have additional questions. We do have a few housekeeping items. There will be 3 poll questions at the end of the webinar and before we take any questions. You will see a pop-up on your screen for each multiple choice question. Please select your answers. If you are a certified financial planner looking for CEU credits for this webinar, there is a handout with our contact information. At the end of the webinar, we will give you the webinar code word to include with your submission. I'd now like to bring your attention to the right side of your screen. If you have questions during the presentation, please enter them at any time into the questions dialog box located on the right-hand side of your screen. If you don't see the dialog box, please click the orange arrow to expand the control panel, click on the question window, type in your question, and hit the send button. We will answer as many of your questions as possible at the end of the presentation. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator and speaker, Anne Ehlert. Anne?
Thanks, Mary, and welcome everyone to the webinar. We have a great turnout today. I'm excited. So I just want to have everybody take a minute to introduce themselves. So I'm the CEO of Protected Tomorrows, but also more importantly on the board of Special Olympics Illinois. And I'm just thrilled that we're able to provide this information to you. So I'd like to introduce Karen Milligan, who's with Special Olympics Illinois. Karen?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be a part of this program, serving our families by providing information that we feel will be very valuable to them. We have a family leadership program that's also helping to get the information out to our local families at the grassroots level. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Karen. And then Brian and Benji Rubin, who are going to be covering a lot of the technical things of the law. So Brian and Benji, you want to introduce yourselves?
Ben, do you want to start?
Sure. So Benji Rubin, I am an attorney. Special needs planning is our entire law practice. There's nothing else. I am vice chair of the American Bar Association Special Needs Planning Committee. I am president of SIB, Supporting Illinois Brothers and Sisters, the Illinois chapter of the National Sibling Leadership Network. So I work a lot with siblings. I'm also a member of the board of directors of the ARC of Illinois, and a member of the Clearbrook Associate Board, which serves over 8,000 individuals with special needs across the state of Illinois, among many other hats. Go ahead.
I'm the old man, Benji's father, founded this practice. I'm the immediate past chair of the ARC of Illinois. We have Benji's brother, my other son, Mitchell, is 36, who has autism. He resides at Clearbrook. Benji mentioned that agency. I've been in that board of directors now 27 years. Again, immediate past chair of the ARC of Illinois, among other hats. Most important is I'm president-elect of Special Needs Alliance, which is a national not-for-profit organization of attorneys throughout the country that specialize in special needs planning. But as Mary alluded to, there's more detailed bios on the handouts.
Okay, and Chase, are you able to connect? So we're working getting in Chase connected.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
can you hear me at
oh,
all?
great. We can hear you.
Thank
Perfect.
you. Perfect.
So Chase, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly, and then we'll get started?
Yep, sorry about that, everyone. Hi, my name is Chasse Rehwinkel. I'm the Director of Policy here at the Treasurer's Office, and one of the programs under my purview is the ABLE program, and so I'm happy here in Illinois, so I'm happy to talk through that later today. So excited to be on.
Great. Okay, so we're going to get started. Those of you know who we've been doing here at Protected Tomorrows a lot of life clear planning for about 30 years now with families. And always one of the issues is, A, how do we have enough saved for our family member? And two, how do we do it in a way that the person doesn't get disqualified from government benefits? So I'm really excited that we now have an Illinois plan. And so let's get started with just some basic overview. So I'm going to cover the basic rules of the program and why do we have it and how did it get started. And Brian and Benji are going to talk about some of the technical things. And then the exciting part is Chase, you're always the star, gets to talk about the Illinois plan, and we'll talk about that from that perspective. So let's get started. What is the purpose of the ABLE Act? How did it get started? So what does ABLE stand for, first of all? Well, the ABLE is the Achieving a Better Life Expectancy, and it became law on December 19th of 2014. And it started out with, it looked very different when it first came about many, many years ago, but over the process, it ended up being an amendment to the Section 529 of the IRS Code, and it created a tax-free savings vehicle for individuals with disabilities. It encourages us as family members and as individuals with disabilities to save privately and to secure those funds in a way that will supplement but not replace government benefits. So that's all really key to all the planning that we do, but knowing it and understanding it is going to be the challenge that we all have. So with that, we're going to talk a lot about those things that we need you to understand. The ABLE Act finally recognizes that the cost of a person with disability, A, is like the cost that all of us have to live, but then the additional costs in addition to what it might cost to live on a daily manner, the costs for a person with disability are even greater. But then we have, especially with SSI and Medicaid, we have this $2,000 limitation. So the need was great to allow individuals with disabilities to be able to save for their future, but also not lose those government benefits. So some very basic things. We're going to get into the details of each of these, but the basics is, number one, it's tax-free savings. So we're going to talk about the benefits of that and how important is it versus for some people it might not be as important. But to be able to save for a lot of people with not having to pay taxes is great. The savings is going to be used for approved expenses. We're going to talk about that. What's the disability rules and what is the onset of disability having to do with age? How many accounts can a person have? What are the contribution limits? And then what's the most you can save into the account? And we're going to be talking about the legislation overall federally, and then we'll get into the state program specifically. So tax-free savings. In order, if you understand the 529 account, a college savings account, we get to save for college tax-free. Now we get to save for special needs tax-free, but it's only tax-free if the money that we have saved is used for approved expenses in the plan. So that's a really important component to understand. And if it's not used for approved expenses, it would be taxed. The income on the account would be taxable and a 10% penalty. So understanding how it can be used is an important component of keeping that tax-free portion. So what are these approved expenses? Well, they're pretty broad, and as we go through some of the examples later, you'll hear us talk about some of the categories and how they're different in relation to a special needs trust. But approved expenses come in a couple of categories. One, education. So if a person's going to go on to enhanced education, higher education, housing, transportation expenses, and we know that transportation is an issue for persons with disabilities, and transportation costs are an important part of their independence. Employment training and support. So I know one of the questions someone asked was, does this cover a job coach? Well, that's part of employment training and support of a person being able to support themselves. So when we look at a person with a disability, what we were trying to always achieve is to allow this person to have a safe life and a fulfilling life. Well, for all of us, safe and fulfilling is a place to live, a place to be comfortable, but also to have a full life where we have access to health care, recreation, transportation. So with that comes assistive technology needs, personal support services, healthcare expenses, management of our financial needs, as well as administrative expenses. So it's a pretty broad level of things that can be used over and above what the government pays for. So that's important to understand that, because if we're using it for things that aren't qualified expenses, all of a sudden we lose some of the benefits of the tax-free. How do we prove that this person has a disability, one, and then what are the rules? So as of today's law, the onset of disability must have occurred prior to age 26. And we need to be able to prove that, and we can prove some of those things by showing the SSI that the person has or that they're entitled to SSDI. They also can be on the compassionate allowance list, which is a list of conditions that are considered disabled per this regulations. And then finally, a person can also self-certify. And the definitions of what you can do to self-certify are all defined in a lot of the detail within the plan. But those are the four main categories. And I'm going to go through a lot of the basics quickly because we've done this webinar already, and so some of you who have heard this already, I don't want to spend too much time on it. But it's important to understand the basics as we get into the more complicated areas. Another important area to understand is a person with a disability or a qualified person can only have one account. So they can't have an account that grandma set up, an account that they set up, and another account that the parents set up. One account. And that account can have contributed into it in a year up to the $14,000, which is the current federal gift amount. That amount will go up as time goes on, but right now it's $14,000. And the maximum amount that can be put in overall into a 529 and therefore into the ABLE account is set by state. And it's a pretty big number. So at this point, we are really going to focus on how do we use this and how do we get that, make sure that the person only has one account and that the family, important part of that is when you're setting up a 529 account, this 529A or ABLE account, that we are making sure that the family has a communication vehicle amongst each other so that if we have a family member who has an account, that we communicate that so that other family members could contribute as well. But remember, the $14,000 is the amount that could go into that account, not the amount that one particular person could contribute so that several people could do that. $14,000 total. So really, what is this? People think, is it the only way we can do it? So if you think about you're building a house, you use lots of tools. And many times when we do financial planning, we use lots of tools, each of us. So this is one of the tools when we're doing planning for a person with a disability for their lifetime and their future and their financial security, that it's one of the things that we can use. It doesn't replace anything, it's new. And it's flexible, it's really accessible to everyone. It's a learning tool. And what do I mean by that? Well, if a person with a disability now gets to save, and they actually are going to be the owner in many cases of these accounts, now we have to do some education as to wise use of money, how do you save, why would you take your own money and put it into this? So it's also a tool to teach. And it makes sense to use it in very specific situations, in a lot of situations, but there are some situations where we need to understand the rules that it might not be used. And finally, anytime we give people a new tool, it's a way to get into trouble. Because if you don't understand the rules, we don't want to do anything that sets a person or an individual up so that they've gotten into trouble, they're using it where it shouldn't be used. So that's the purpose of this webinar, is to help everybody understand what it's used for and what the rules are. And it isn't for everyone, okay? It's not the same as a 529. And a really important component is sometimes families will say to me, oh, so now I don't need a special needs trust because we can save this way. But because it only does, so a person, you're going to save for an individual with a disability for their lifetime. You're going to save money for them, and you're funding the Special Needs Trust. It doesn't replace that, because if you think about what an individual needs for their lifetime, it's a big number. All of us, let alone a person with a disability. So if we need to fund a lot, and we can only put $14,000 a year into this, it has a very specific place in the toolbox, and it also the Special Needs Trust as well. And so we'll be talking about the differences of those, but I also wanted you to understand that it is different than the college funding account that we all know. So it's tax-free, that's the same. And the state will identify the investment choices, which we're going to hear. So those two things are very similar to the 529. But what's different is this. In a 529, you can have many accounts. Grandma can set up a 529 for someone, and grandma, mom and dad can. This has one account, remember, per person with a disability. That's it. And the annual contribution limitation is different. So we can put $14,000 a year in, and there is no upfront funding. In the 529, people have asked me, well, can't I do the same thing in the 529, or I can put 5 years of funding it? It doesn't work that way. It's $14,000 a year, and that's it. Okay, so those are the differences as you start to compare it to that other vehicle that we use for college. So now we have the basic ground rules of how do we use it, how many can we have, is it tax-free. We're going to have, now I'm going to have Brian and Benji talk about what are the rules relative to all the different types of vehicles, because we talk it's a tool. So here's all the different tools that we can use, and they're going to talk about how they're different. Okay, so Brian and Benji?
Let me start the first half of this chart, and then I'm going to turn it over to Benji. But if you look across it, I like using pictures. It's easier to follow. So look at this chart. And there may be assets in somebody's name alone, first column. It may be a third-party special needs trust, which is commonly what parents will set up as a reserve fund. Third-party means that person's own money can't go into it. You'll see a reference to QDT underneath that, which means it's a special tax treatment that we'll talk about, or Benji will talk about. Then there's a first-party trust, sometimes called an OBRA trust, OBRA, or a payback trust. That's for that person's money. Maybe it's they have too much money in their name, they have a medical malpractice case settlement, grandma left money to them, not correctly to a third-party trust, but to them directly. So we have a first-party trust. That's been around since 1993 federal law, 1996 Illinois law. Third-party trust has been around since 1982 by court decisions in Illinois, 1991 by statute in Illinois. And now we have this new animal called an EnABLE account, and we're going to talk and compare it. So again, I'm going to take the first few lines here. The maximum amount, if somebody's on SSI, as Mary Ann said, is they can't take more than $2,000 plus exempt assets, a house, car, certain exempt assets. In a third-party trust, special needs trust that parents will set up, as I have for my son Mitchell, is unlimited. You could have $46 million in there, not a problem. First-party trusts, again, no limit to how much money is in there. In an EnABLE account, if the person is on SSI, there's a limit of $100,000 before their Social Security, their SSI is suspended. Remember, if they're on SSDI, there is no asset test. The maximum you can contribute basically in a third-party or first-party trust is unlimited. And as Mary Ann said, $14,000 max. So we got to be careful, especially if the parents are divorced, that both the mom and dad are not setting it up because the second account that's established will not qualify as an EnABLE account. The allowable expenditures, before I turn over to Benji, I'm going to do this last line. The allowable expenditures is interesting. Of course, if the money's in the person's name alone, they could spend it for their benefit. A third-party trust can be spent for anything that is for the benefit of that beneficiary. There's not a list, as you will see, for an EnABLE account. It's anything that's for the benefit of that beneficiary. And a first-party trust or an over payback trust, a little different. It's limited to the sole benefit of the beneficiary. So an expenditure that benefits somebody else is not a legitimate expenditure. In the EnABLE account, the original law had a list of disability-related expenses, which scared people because does that mean a vacation could be paid? What does it really mean? But the original statute said that the Treasury, the Federal Treasury Department, can elaborate and clarify and add things to it And since the federal law was established in 2014, the Treasury has continuously given proposed rules and definitions that they have tried to broaden what it could be used for, but it's still uncharted territories to a great deal, because though the federal law was established for ABLE accounts at the end of 2014, it wasn't until last year that states started to establish them. So it's really a new tool. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Benji to talk about these next three areas.
Thank you. Just one other thing on that issue of the disability-related expenses, it does appear that it's still unclear whether or not it could be used for a vacation. That still appears to be something that hasn't been clarified yet. Hopefully they will in the near future. As for this concept of a payback to the state, for money that's in an individual's name, well, they can't have more than $2,000 in their name anyways and be eligible for benefits, so that wouldn't be an issue for them. For a third-party special needs trust, so mom and dad or grandparents, people leave money in this third-party special needs trust for the child, and it's used during their lifetime. When the child passes away, there is nothing to be paid back to the state whatsoever. It goes on to wherever the parents decided it would go. Maybe it's to grandchildren or great-grandchildren or some charities they care about, or whatever the case may be, the state can't claim anything from that trust on the child's passing. In a first-party payback, OBRA, D4A trust, a lot of different names for it, as my father talked about, that kind of trust, there is actually a payback to the state when the child passes away from whatever's left in the trust. So if there was $100,000 put into it initially, but there's only $10,000 left, the maximum that they can get paid back is $10,000, and it's based on what the state's actually paid in actual dollars during the lifetime of that individual for their benefit. An ABLE account is a slightly different kind of payback, whereas a first-party trust is all the way back to date of birth. With an ABLE account, it's Medicaid that's been spent, Medicaid dollars spent for the child's benefit since the establishment of the ABLE account itself. But again, there's this payback to the state on the child's passing for whatever's in that ABLE account up to what they've spent during their lifetime. So that's this payback concept. Now, there is talk about not having a payback potentially in the future if legislation was to change that. It is up to the states to do it. Pennsylvania has decided not to require a payback to the state on the child's passing from an ABLE account. Illinois currently has not, they are allowed to unless the law changes as of now. And again, I'm sure Chase will talk more about that. As for income tax consequences for each of these options, if an individual has assets in their name, then it's they have their taxed as any individual. So the first $10,400, because of the standard deduction and the personal exemption, is not going to be taxed. Then you have the next 10% tax bracket for the next $9,325, 15% after that, next $28,000 and change. For a third-party special needs trust, it's a little bit complicated. First, because it's what they call a qualified disability trust, my father mentioned, it gets a special tax treatment as a trust. Most trusts, $100 is all you're allowed before they start taxing you. And if in a special needs trust, because it's a qualified disability trust, if it's drafted correctly, it's $4,050 is the exemption. So the first $4,050 of income, so if there's $100,000 in the trust and there's $5,000 of income that year, the first $4,050 is not going to be taxed. Then to the extent that money is spent for the benefit of the beneficiary, so you went on a vacation, you spent the money from a trust on the vacation, bought them new clothes, whatever the case may be, the next 10, then that is going to go on to the beneficiary's 1040, the disabled the individual with disabilities, they're 1040, and they have their own exemption, again, standard deduction, and they're going to be at very low tax brackets. So if you think about it like this, if you're using a third-party trust and you're comparing to an ABLE account, the tax benefits are really not, they're non-existent in terms of as a benefit compared to a third-party trust, because to the extent money spent for the benefit of the beneficiary and you have the $4,050 exemption, we can exempt $14,400 from
450, there's a typo there, it's 14,450.
Yeah. 450, excuse me, because we had the update for 2017. 40,450 could be exempt from taxation, for of income, and that's a 15. We're talking about a 15% return on $100,000. That's a pretty big return to be worrying about. So all right, that's third-party trust. How does a first-party trust work? It's considered to be taxable income to the beneficiary. So if my brother has a first-party special needs trust, had this concept, he has a kind of trust, and there was income on it, it goes onto his 1040, onto his tax return, and he again has his exemption, deduction, and then low tax brackets after that. The ABLE account, like one of the commonalities with the 529 plan, is it is tax exempt in terms of the growth inside the ABLE account. However, if you use it for a non-disability related expense, you will have a 10% penalty and have to pick up the income tax that was exempt before. So you have to be careful to only spend it on what they call disability related expenses, which we're still trying to clarify as to where the limits are. But that's another obviously aspect to that. As for reporting requirements, there are no reporting requirements of how you spend money in a third-party trust or how the individual spends their own money. But for a first-party trust, in Illinois, it's on request only. Some states do require more reporting of expenditures on a first-party trust, but Illinois, it's up to Illinois whether or not they want to request it. As for ABLE accounts, reporting how you spend the money is required because they have to make sure that they're always disability-related expenses, so that they can, if they aren't, they can apply that 10% penalty and the applicable income tax.
To note, the original statute said that the state would have to do the reporting and check the expenditures and everything else, and it was changed over time to where the individual, the beneficiary, is supposed to be determining if the disability expenses are correct and do reporting. The state will still report the existence of the account, but as to the expenditures, they left it up to the beneficiary as of now, because I'd say basically states complained that it was putting too much of a burden on them.
So lots of rules around these different programs, and one of the things I will add is that not all your advisors really understand, especially taxes. So it's really important to work with people who understand the special needs rules, especially having to do with when you're working with attorneys, we're working with CPAs, financial people. All professionals don't know this. Some are great at it, some don't know anything, and then there's the people in the middle. So it's really important to families that you ask your professionals how much they know before you start getting help. Okay, so we've got these tools. How do we use them? What's the rest of the things they need to know, Benji and Brian?
All right, so I'll start. A third-party special needs trust historically was where parents left gifts and inheritances. Grandparents would leave it. Anybody who wanted to leave money, siblings wanted to leave money, unlimited dollars in it. Again, as Benji explained, that in theory, if money is being spent from the trust for the person's benefit, you could have up to $14,000 potentially and not have any tax. So for parents' money, that's the place that people could use. A first-party trust, you don't want to put money in, or an OBRA trust, because the state, that one, unlike an ABLE account, it's not there's not an option. The state basically gets the funds back anytime that any Medicaid was spent for that person's benefit during their lifetime. There's effectively a lien when that person passes away. So that's not for parents or other people's money. There's this concept called the pooled trust, as you see, P-O-O-L-E-D. And these are trusts that are run by not-for-profits. And they have third-party trusts, they have first-party trusts, and each beneficiary basically has a sub-account, and the trust is not-for-profits run them. And again, a third-party trust, be it pooled or private, great for parents' money, except the parents aren't the trustees, and the not-for-profit's the trustee. And an ABLE account, again, parents put money in, they could, but remember there's a potential payback when the child passes away. So it's not the first place you would want to leave parents' money unless the money is going to be spent. So you say, hey, we're going to put some money in, but we really expect this to be spent during the child's lifetime, calculated risk fine, but as long as you are aware that if the child passes, the beneficiary passes, that there is, as of now, a lien for reimbursement to Medicaid for any Medicaid paid after the establishment of the account. The person with special needs themselves, their money cannot go into a third-party trust. It taints the trust. They can go into a first-party trust, again, since 1993 federal law, 1996 Illinois law. It can go into a pooled first-party trust, and it can go into an ABLE account. This is a great place. As we'll talk about different uses, how this could be used, if it's the beneficiary's own money, own assets, and we have a problem with threshold dollar amounts, an ABLE account, if we're talking about under $14,000 a year, is going to be a viable alternative to something else, and it has the additional benefit that we'll see in a second, that the beneficiary could be in control of their own money. I'll take one more line. Limit the funding. Again, as we said before, no limit for a special needs trust. The ABLE account has a cap, again, $100,000 for SSI. For Medicaid, the only cap is the cap for 529 accounts. Each state has their own maximum. Illinois currently has a $350,000 max that it can't go over, or it will interfere with it won't be an ABLE account anymore, effectively, and we'll have a problem with qualification for Medicaid. And again, the $14,000 a year. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Benji.
Thanks. So when we're talking about who's in control of these dollars, the funds in each of these vehicles for saving, and a third-party trust, it has to be someone other than the person with disabilities. So it could be parents, it could be grandparents, it could be an aunt or uncle, it could be the siblings of the person with disabilities, but it cannot be the individual with disabilities themselves. Same thing with a first-party payback trust. And so for the individual who may be on SSI and Medicaid because of purely physical disabilities and in no way any cognitive disabilities, that's definitely a drawback, because now they can't control those funds, even though they are fully capable cognitively of controlling those funds. For a pooled trust, again, it's a nonprofit organization who's going to be in charge of using those funds for the beneficiary. With an ABLE account, one of the great uses for an ABLE account is to allow some degree of financial independence for the individual with disabilities, because they actually can control the ABLE account if they don't have a guardian. So if they are their own guardian, if their parents or no other individual became guardian for them, they actually, by default, if they're over 18, are the guardian, are the account controller, the owner of the account, and able to control the dollars and how they're spent in the ABLE account. That's, of course, now a drawback in other situations where the individual may not be able to manage their funds, but parents never became guardian for them, and now they are going to be in control of that ABLE account by default. There are ways to try to, with powers of attorney, to try and allow parents to help them with it, but it's certainly not, they certainly would have the final say on the ABLE account, at least by default. As for small amounts of money, if you're talking about saving $50 a month or $100 a month, you know, an ABLE account might make a lot of sense, or we're talking about, you know, the only amount we think we're going to be able to save during the lifetime or for the beneficiary, even on the parent's passing, is, you know, a very small amount of money, or it's a lawsuit settlement from an accident and it's $5,000 or $10,000. It would, a ABLE account makes a lot of sense in that case. We don't have to pay an attorney to thousands of dollars to draft a special needs trust for a few $1,000 settlement amount. And again, when it comes to, you know, with pooled trust also is another place you can save smaller amounts of money, where it doesn't really make sense efficiency-wise to use a special needs trust for. Tax-free savings, as we talked about, ABLE account, just like a 529 plan, does grow income tax-free, and the other trusts, the options do not. That said, as we just went over in the tax slide, the tax benefit when the dollars we're talking about of $14,000 a year and a max cap of $100,000 for SSI are pretty de minimis. They're pretty small, and effectively maybe zero benefit compared to a third-party special needs trust in most cases.
Before we get off this slide, just go back up where a person's own money. I just want to point out that a first-party special needs trust, a private one, you can't put funds in there after the person's 65. A pooled trust, some states you can, but not in Illinois for first-party trust. So if the beneficiary is over 65, this is a great item for ABLE accounts, because there is no age cap, but there is for first-party trust. I'm sorry.
The other point on the ABLE account is, if a person is on the payback part of it, if someone is already getting Social Security and a DAC benefit on the parent's record, and maybe they're on Medicare and sometimes have health insurance or a supplement instead of Medicaid. Those people also would not have any Medicaid payback, perhaps, if they're not getting Medicaid funding for residential. And so those ABLE accounts, too, would have a significant value in those situations.
You just got to remember that Medicaid could be job coaches, it could be
exactly.
home-based waiver.
So all great points. Just there's a lot of tools and a lot of technical things here that we need to pay attention to for parents or for the person with a disability. Knowing all this stuff is just really complicated. But I want to make sure we have enough time to get into the Illinois rules. So hope we covered a lot. We're going to answer questions on the end, and that was great, Benji and Brian. So I think we talked a lot about the limitations. Do you guys have anything else to add about
and I think we basically covered that.
Yeah, I think we covered this, is that there's a suspension of the SSI. Okay, so let's talk about how is it probably going to be used. Before we get into Illinois, I think let's take a few minutes to talk about third-party money. Brian or Benji, you want to start with this?
Go ahead, Benji.
Sure. Common uses for a third-party trust is gifts from parents, your grandparents, want to make gifts to all the grandchildren. A third-party trust is a great place for them to do that. There's no payback to the state when the child passes away. Again, a great place for third-party money, other people's money. But when we talk about an ABLE account, and we're saying about smaller amounts of money. So maybe grandma's making a $100 check, and maybe that's a good place for that to go to an ABLE account. When it comes to people with very small estates, under $100,000 in total assets on their passing, maybe, and only a small portion is going to go to the ABLE account. Again, you're limited to $14,000 in a year, so it's got to be very.
Let's zero in on the housing loophole, if you will.
Yeah, for time-sensitive purposes, absolutely. So housing could be a very valuable tool. So ABLE could be a valuable tool. So with housing expenses, the general rule is if the child is on SSI, Supplemental Security Income, then they will reduce the SSI amount from the maximum $735 in 2017 down to $490. So it's the maximum reduction of 1/3 if the parents are helping subsidize their housing expenses, or even a third-party special needs trust is helping subsidize housing expenses, or a first-party special needs trust for that matter, helping subsidize housing expenses. However, ABLE accounts are a loophole. ABLE accounts do not count as what they call ISM, but basically they don't count against the beneficiary, just like parents helping or third-party trust helping would. So therefore, if the parents contribute to an ABLE account and the ABLE account helps subsidize their housing expenses, for example, let's say they're living in an apartment with some supports and the cost of the apartment is $1,500 a month, and the parents are obviously helping subsidize it because SSI isn't covering it, what the parents could be doing is contributing $700 a month to the ABLE account, and then the ABLE account could be paying the extra subsidy for the rent, thereby not reducing the SSI amount.
Right. So that's a great new opportunity. That's a great new tool for that purpose. The other thing sometimes is we have grandma wants to give a gift to all the children, and sometimes she's giving a bigger gift. Sometimes giving $5,000. If grandma's going to either give $5,000 to everybody or give $5,000 to everybody but your child, sometimes I would say, okay, let's use the ABLE account for that $5,000 because it'll be money that we could be used shorter term for other planning.
And they could take advantage of the tax benefit, the annual exclusion amount, which they couldn't with a special needs trust.
Exactly. So, okay, first-party money. So this is a great opportunity too. So when we talk about first-party money, it's money that the individual with a disability would typically get, and so that's their own money. What are we going to do with that, and how can we use the ABLE account in those situations?
So with a small inheritance, like I said, $10,000 from each of the grandchildren from a grandparent, the ABLE account makes a ton of sense. Why spend thousands of dollars drafting a special needs trust and all the work related to that? Rather just open up an ABLE account and put it right in there. With child support, the new plan is that you're to be able to actually possibly, but it looks like that's where the direction we're going, being able to actually have the court order in a divorce situation order the child support to be paid to an ABLE account.
Let's pause here for a second, Benji, just to understand this. In Illinois, a court can order child support for the rest of the child's lifetime if they're disabled under the Illinois statute. But if they do that, it's a dollar for dollar reduction of SSI plus the spend down for Medicaid, unless it's paid, current rules say, to a first party trust. But the proposed changes, we're thinking, they'll allow it, if it's small enough, under $14,000 a year, for the child support to be paid to an EnABLE account.
As long as the child support is under that amount.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And so for smaller amounts of child support, that does work out, and you avoid a first-party trust again in that situation. Small litigation settlements. So it's a mass. There's a mass for litigation. There's it's going to be a small check for every individual, or whatever the case may be, but it's to be $10,000 is the settlement for the beneficiary who's on SSI, on Medicaid. Instead
Or it could be a settlement paid over many years, and the annual
annuity payments are a lot lower, so then they could do it. So for those kinds of smaller size settlements, an EnABLE account may make a lot of sense. And if there's too much, earning Social Security, so for example, they are a DAC, as you referred to before, Marianne, and they're getting, $1,500 a month of Social Security on mom or dad's record, and they have their own Social Security record. They're getting $400, $500 a month, and they're going to go over $2,000 basically every month. What do? They could start siphoning some of that money off into an EnABLE account each month to make sure they're always under $2,000, as long as they don't over time put more than $14,000 in that given year.
Or they're earning money. Sometimes parents are worried because they're stop your child from making more because it might accumulate. So we don't want to stop our child from having the capability. Let's let them earn, as long as they're not going over the earning limit, but they're earning money and they want to save. So this is a great way to have them learn to take their earnings and put it into this account and save for themselves, and to not have a count against them because they're saving, and it continues to reinforce that independence.
Absolutely.
So dangers. What are the dangers families face? We sometimes talk to families and they say, "Oh, I'm so confused." Lack of understanding the rules and how to use it, and funding it beyond what you can, and suspension. So we've talked about a lot of these things, and understanding them is key.
Let's go back. Just that last bullet item is very important.
Oh, right.
Is that if there is a guardianship, if somebody has a guardian, under the Illinois version, the court cannot second-guess expenditures. But if the money belongs to that person, you still, under the current statute, you still have to go into court to get a court order to move it to an EnABLE account. The judge's permission to move it to the EnABLE account. May have to post a surety bond. This is things that one of my other hats, I'm one of the 11 commissioners of the Illinois Guardianship Advocacy Commission. We're going to propose changes to make it easier for parents, if there is a guardian, to still use an EnABLE account and not have to be tied up in the guardianship court.
So if you are a guardian, make sure you understand that and get some assistance in how to use the EnABLE Act. Okay, so here we are, and you're excited about it because you see the implications in your life, for your child or for yourself or for a sibling, let's say. And one or two things either is going to happen. Your state has a plan and you're eligible to use it, or your state doesn't have a plan and perhaps you can use another state's plan. But some states restrict outside users. So you want to open an account. You want to understand the fees. You want to understand the investment opportunities. And yay, Illinois now has a plan. I'm so excited. So with that, I'm going to introduce Chase, and I'm going to let him tell us all about the new program.
Thank you so much. So yes, Illinois does have a plan, and it is open and ready to go. You can actually go on and sign up today if you would like to do that electronically. We kind of opened up in what I'll call is like the second wave of these states signing up for EnABLE. We took a little bit longer to sign up because we actually entered into a partnership with 14 states now. We actually, it looks like we added a 15th this morning. So we'll have 15 by the time you probably look online. And the idea of this was to have different EnABLE programs for each of the states, but to share on back-end record keeping and general services to cut down on any of the costs that are going to the individuals. We wanted to get fees as low as possible, and also make sure that we provided as many services as possible. So one other thing I wanted to state with Illinois' plan You do not have to be from Illinois to sign up for Illinois ABLE. You can be in any state in the United States. You actually can do that for any of the ABLE plans in the National ABLE Alliance. And one of those states in the National ABLE Alliance is Pennsylvania, the one that Ben, I believe, referred to as the one that's trying to work on this clawback measure for the Medicaid funds. They're kind of using it as a test of the federal regulations in order to make sure that the states can do this. It looks like it will be fine. We expect that all the states within the alliance will follow suit probably within the next year. We've identified bipartisan support here in Illinois in the legislature that would be willing to move this through. So we're hopeful to fix that problem in the next year. We're also be adding a further tax deduction, state tax deduction, similar to what we have with biplane. So
imagine being able to get a state deduction and also being able to save and not worry about the payback. That would be fabulous. Yeah.
Yes, and that might pass this March. We have bipartisan support for that too. Still working on the terms. So we launched on the 30th of January. Eligible beneficiaries or guardians can sign up or get more information by going to IllinoisAble.com. Or if you just don't like doing web services, there's a ABLE helpline. They can also walk you through how to sign up for accounts. It's free to use that helpline. You see the number right there. Paper enrollment forms just became available. If you want to do that, you can request them at our office. For now, you'll also be able to go into a Fifth Third Bank branch later on, as you'll see later. So with the next slide, here is our investment option. We have currently 6 passively managed investment options. You can see them there. They're very straightforward. The underlying funds were chosen by price and as well as being best in breed for the particular aspects of them. They're backed by, they're managed by brand name companies like BlackRock and Vanguard Investments. If you have questions on this individual funds and you go to the website, you click on the icon for each of the different options, and it'll give you kind of a description about what's going into that. If you have further questions, feel free to call the help. So pricing, we have breakpoint pricing, which means the more states that join the consortium and the more people that sign up, the cheaper it gets automatically. Here are some of the breakpoint right here. So we'll start off at with the investment with that 2 to 6 underlying fund fee plus the program management fee. That's the one that goes down over time. We expect that to go down fairly quickly. These are just for the investment related options. You know, those are hopeful to get cheaper and cheaper quicker. If you want to go on to the next slide. We also will have a banking option that'll be open next month. The banking option does not have an underlying investment fee to it. It is just a program management fee like any of the other ABLE programs. It's a interest-bearing checking account available through a Fifth Third Bank or our service right now. We definitely are looking forward to that getting launched. It is an FDIC insured option, and it has over 43,000 fee-free ATMs. It has check writing capabilities, no overdraft fees. You can allow moving from checking account or remain shelter in the ABLE plan. There are no card issuance fees as well. That'll be available coming very shortly.
And this is something families have been asking for, so that's wonderful too. Mm-hmm. So now what? So they open an account. They have the ABLE account. Now what? What do they have to do in order to stay compliant? and you've got these expenses that you're taking out of the account, keeping track of them. You know, at tax time, you can be asked to report on how those expenses were used, so they follow those allowable expenses. So that's a really important component of understanding how to use this. And then the secondly is understanding your investment choices. So when the money is going in, if it's going to be for longer term, which portfolio to use. I think you'll get, you know, on the help desk, you'll be able to get asked some of those questions, answer some of those questions for you. But you know, how long is this money for, and how do you position those investment choices is something that everybody needs to be thinking about for their own money as well as for this money. Anything else to add on that? Anybody? Okay. I know we want to get to questions. So what's going to happen going forward? The one thing we do know is things always change. So you need to be proactive if you're going to use it. Everybody on this call is going to be proactive at trying to help make sure that you understand it, that the clarification of the rules as they come out are continued. And so as rules change, we will continue to do future webinars to make sure that you're up to speed. So I think we have a quick little poll that we're going to take just so we get a sense of who's on so we can do future webinars for you. And Mary, I think you're going to read these and have people answer the polls. True?
Yes, I am. The first question we've just launched. We just want to know if you're from the state of Illinois. So if you could answer this, we'd be more than happy to share the results with you at the end of the webinar. Almost everybody has voted. We do appreciate. All you have to do is click in one of the radio buttons next to either the yes or the no. And we'll be closing the poll in about 10 seconds. And we're going to go ahead and close this poll. The next question, did you participate in this webinar for yourself, for a family member, or in a professional capacity? And if you could answer this. Just about everybody has voted. And we'll be moving on to the third question now. Thank you for your answers. And our third question, do you think at this time you'll be opening up an EnABLE account? Yes, no, or you're not sure and you need more information? And again, just about everybody has voted. And we do appreciate you taking the time to let us know.
Great, because that's going to help us understand who's on the call and who needs more help. So with that, we've had questions come in. And again, feel free to type in your questions so we can answer them. Now, we're going to take a little bit of time and answer what we can. We're pretty close to the end. We're going to take some extra time, at least 5 minutes, and answer some questions. But you can keep typing your questions or send them to us. And we are going to go ahead and have Mary read the questions that came in. And from there, we will be able to answer. What we're going to do with the questions that we can answer that come in is we're going to create an FAQ from those questions and send them out to everybody. We'll also have them posted at the same place that we're going to have this webinar posted.
So our first question, I currently have a special needs trust for my 36-year-old daughter with disabilities. Currently it's unfunded and probably won't be funded until my estate plan, which happens after my death. Assuming I do start an EnABLE account now, and as long as its total doesn't exceed the maximum of $100,000, can money be transferred from the special needs trust to the EnABLE account on an as-needed basis after my death?
Brian or Benji?
So, what I say, first of all, a couple things. One is you could potentially do so, all right? But the question is what is the purpose of doing so? If you put money into well, first, actually, let me take a step back. The special needs trust has to allow the contributions to the EnABLE account. Depending on how broadly the special needs trust document is worded, it may depending on how broadly it's worded, it may allow for the contributions to an EnABLE account.
We have specifically revised our special needs trust with the equity of EnABLE. That specifically
do you recommend?
Says, yes.
Do you recommend people that have special needs trusts get them modified to allow that?
Well, no two kids are the same, no two situations are the same. And if it's for an individual, there's no harm in having it in there as long as you trust your trustees, no pun intended.
Right.
Right.
Okay. But they can do it.
Yes.
Okay.
Our next question. Yes, I currently have a Bright Start program account.
I'm sorry. Let me just remind people. As of right now, if you're taking it from a third-party trust and put it into an ABLE account, as of this moment, you've gone from no payback to a payback. Hopefully it's going to change, but right now, yeah.
So again, it might make sense for individuals who are higher functioning and want to be able to use it, give them some control, some limited amounts of money to have that independence. But as a vehicle for if this money's in a special needs trust, it's available more broadly to be used for anything for their benefit. There's no restrictions on it.
Yeah.
There's really the benefit of putting in the ABLE account. Even small amounts would be more for financial independence than anything else.
Exactly. Exactly. Great point. Okay.
Our next question. I currently have a Bright Start program account. Can I use the funds from this account for my disabled son?
Not yet. Well, originally, we were hoping that 529s were going to be able to be moved to 529As or to college 529 to an ABLE account. That didn't make it. There was proposed legislation in Congress to do that again. So far, not allowed. You can't take the 529 and move it directly into a 529A or an ABLE account.
Yeah, that's the case. There's a federal bill right now called HR 529 that the state treasurers across the country have supported, and it is a bipartisan bill, and part of it includes the ability to roll over a college savings account into an ABLE account. The tea leaves in Congress right now suggest that will pass. But with Congress, there's always a risk of one way or another. But right now, we've been given a good indication that has a chance.
Because last year, it didn't come out of committee.
Yes, and there's some reasons for that, mostly because of stuff that was attached. This time, it's been cleared up a little bit differently.
Great. Another question was asked, will Special Olympics continue to get the word out about the ABLE Act to parents, perhaps at the summer games?
Special Olympics Illinois sure is committed to supporting programs like this and sharing this kind of information that's of interest and value to our families. We do hope to have a short program on the ABLE Act at both our state basketball tournament and summer games events coming up in March and June, respectively. We will work with Anne Ehlert at Protected Tomorrows and Brian and Benji Rubin at Rubin Law to stay current on the topic, and also refer families that need more assistance and more information onto those folks.
Great. What happens if you open an account in Ohio? Can you close the Ohio account and open one in Illinois?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, you absolutely can. There's some things you want to make sure that you check before you do that. Essentially, if there's any rollover fees associated with the program you're transferring from. For Illinois, we don't have any rollover penalties or fees associated with it, so you'll be able to roll it over like you do with a 529.
But just keeping in mind, you can't open up one in Illinois if you don't close the one in Ohio. You only have one account.
Right.
Correct.
Another question, can money be transferred back to a third-party trust if the balance in the ABLE account approaches $100,000?
So,
the answer is, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, no, right now, definitely not, especially where there's a payback currently or potential payback on the ABLE account money, and a third-party trust has no payback. So right now, no, but go ahead, Dad.
Well, just the answer is right now, the only way funds can come out of there without causing income tax and penalties by being spent for the benefit of the person for the allowed expenditures. So there isn't that provision at this time. Things can change, but at this time, you can't take it from the ABLE and just toss it into the special needs trust.
Wonderful.
Good question.
One other question, is an ABLE account a place where my son could put some of his earnings so he does not go over the $2,000 limit in his checking account?
And that's a great question, too. So that's one of the things we covered, is that an individual who's working and is making money and wants to save it, that's one of the areas where we do see it being used.
I want to clarify two things. One is ABLE is covering assets, not income. So the person loses eligibility because they're working and making too much income. The ABLE account's not going to help them there.
Right.
And I lost my train of thought, so go ahead.
Yeah. So remember, when they make the money, that's income. So you do have to monitor their income level so they don't lose their disability.
The only other thing I want to mention is that if somebody's working, there is another program out there called HBWD, Health Benefits for Workers with Disabilities, where they're allowed, if they're working and Social Security is coming out of their check, they can have up to $25,000 in assets. It's not income tax free, but they can have up to $25,000 in assets, they have qualified plan benefits, and they can earn more money, well over $3,000, and keep Medicaid. They'll lose the SSI, but Medicaid could be kept with what they call HBWD, Health Benefits for Workers with Disabilities.
Right. Yeah, so sometimes we talk about the basic programs on these webinars because that's what everybody understands, but there's lots of other programs that might be impacted or be beneficial to your child that over and above the ABLE account. So it's important to understand all of the programs that might impact your child and learn about those.
Absolutely.
Any more questions that we have? I probably have time for one more question, Mary. Is there one more there?
Let's see. Will a recording of this be available after today's presentation?
Absolutely, of course. So it will be recorded, and we will send you a link to everybody who participated on the call. We'll send you a link to the presentation. We'll let you know. We'll also send you other information that you might need after we review this, and the FAQ, the questions, other questions that have come in that we didn't have time to cover. We'll send you those with the answers as well as these answers. Or if you have come up with questions afterwards, there you can send them to. You see on the site, on the screen, the different places that you can get more information. I think, Mary, you also had a code for CFP people. Okay.
I'd like to say thank you to all of our presenters, and we will be ending the webinar shortly. For our CFP attendees today, the webinar code word is ABLE 2017. That's ABLE 2017. If you have any more questions or if you would like more information, please feel free to contact us at the information on the slide that's currently being shown or at protectedtomorrows.com. This does conclude our webinar presentation today. Thank you again for your participation, and I hope you have a wonderful day.